Hello everybody, I'm KC and welcome to an edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about Stitch Day. Again, because good old Experiment 626 has become rather famous on this channel. For those who don't know, 2 years ago for Stitch Day, when I was less articulate and had far less experience on how to get video clips or properly edit audio, I reviewed the very controversial Stitch anime and gave it a positive review overall. And I thought that was going to become a very infamous video because almost every other review I saw of the anime was negative to the point of outrage, even though most people didn't seem to get past the first 3 episodes. But it was quite the opposite. The video was met with overwhelming positivity. By the way, thank you all for your lovely comments, and is still my most popular video to date, currently with over 13,000 views. For context, that's more than every video of my To Infinity War and Beyond series combined. Times 10. Yeah, I'm a pretty small fish in the humongous ocean of internet reviewers. I do love and I'm very grateful to the community I have managed to build so far. With the exception of maybe 10 videos, my reviews never get that much attention. So I don't tend to have certain things that other reviewers do, like getting a lot of requests to review a certain thing, with one exception. Today for Stitch Day, instead of actually talking about something that people generally seem to like in the huge Lilo and Stitch franchise, let's talk about the other spin-off sequel thingy, Stitch and I. Yep. They did it again. I think the day the first trailer dropped for this show, people started talking about this in the comments of my Stitch anime review, and as soon as the first episode aired, I've been getting requests to review this series. Well, if that's what you guys want, I am happy to deliver. So let's see what new adventures there are for Stitch in China this time, in Stitch and I. The story starts with Stitch escaping from a bunch of aliens who want to capture him as he suddenly crashes towards Earth. Are we sensing a theme here? Only instead of crashing this time, he floats down, protected by a spontaneous magical aura. I swear I've seen this before. Stitch is then found by a new little girl, I. Shenanigans ensue and Stitch decides to stay with I while he searches for an important shrine. We'll get back to that. And Jumbo and Pleakley drop in to go get him a couple episodes later and decide to stick around as well. As they do, but I'm not complaining. There's quite a bit to unpack here story-wise, at the same time, not much at all. So before we do that, let's take a look at the cast, old and new. And unlike last time, we're just gonna cut straight to the chase and talk about our new heroine. I, as a young girl who lives with her sister after the death of their parents, a pretty free-spirited girl, but the other kids think she's weird and make fun of her. And another authority figure is trying to take her away from what is considered an unfit home to live in the city.
Anyone else getting deja vu?
I think you can see where I'm going with this. As far as backstory and relationships with other characters, I is Lilo. There's no way around that. And don't get me wrong, having some similarities isn't necessarily a bad thing. Being different and lonely, even a missing parent would have been fine. But this is so copy and pasted, it's almost embarrassing. Say what you want about Yuna, but at least she was different from Lilo in many ways. But here I guess they figured that this idea worked before, it'll probably work again. Sure, there are differences, but not that many. Something that's especially weird is that I has extended family. Something that Lilo and Nani didn't appear to have, which made them feel more alone. So when I might be taken away, it's not by a government agent, but by her aunt. It just makes the situation feel like less of a crisis. I will give credit where credit is due though. Most of the strong emotional moments in the series come from the loss of I and JJ's parents. Like the speech JJ gives when Jumbo and Pleakley try to take Stitch away, or in the obligatory dream episode where I gets to talk to her parents again, even when she's inspired by their memory at the end of episode 8. It's good stuff, and it follows the trend of the girls Stitch befriends being lonely and in need of family. It's just bogged down by the fact that 1, it's so transparently Lilo's story and has no shame about that, and 2, they have more active families, so the loneliness doesn't seem as pronounced as before. But okay, that's just her backstory and stuff. What about Ai's character? Well, she's very in touch with her culture, which continues the trend of having a culture Stitch lands in play a major part in the story and lives of the characters, and she's optimistic and knows just what to say, and Honestly, I'm struggling here. Not to say that Ai has no personality, but she's nowhere near as eccentric as Lilo or even Yuna. In fact, Ai has her own rival kid with Mei Ling, but it seems sort of like a superficial addition. By that I mean that I cannot figure out why these girls apparently don't like Ai. Sure, bullies don't need a reason to bully, but with the others, it was clear why they were targets because of how different they were from the other kids. The most unusual thing I can see about Ai compared to them is that she's nice and not superficial. And again, I know that can get you bullied. I know firsthand that just being nice can make you a target for this stuff at their age. But here, it's just not that convincing to me. Especially since they never seem to hurt Ai's feelings. Mei Ling is supposed to be the main girl bullying Ai, but she actually seems to be pretty cool with her. She's not really mean or bossy and only really picks on her because her friends and family do, which is a pretty interesting display of peer pressure when you think about it, but the show keeps trying to pin her as the leader of these girls who pick on Ai, and I don't buy it. Some of her friends are meaner to Ai than she is. In fact, there are many times throughout the season when she gets along perfectly fine with these girls once they drop their attitudes for a minute. So again, I don't know what problem these girls have with her in the first place. Heck, I don't know what problem anyone would have with Ai. She gets along with Stitch instantly, Jumba and Pleakley drop everything to help this kid despite the consequences, and everyone, even her bullies, seem to get along with her perfectly fine, and yet treat her as more peculiar than I think she actually is. I think the worst thing you can say about Ai is that she's reckless, and even that hardly ever leads to any major problems. The closest we get is in episode 6, where Stitch and Ai start fighting because the script said so, and they get in more fights as they try to get through the adventure. But then Jumba creates this creature known as the Spirit of Justice, we'll get to that, a creature who can point towards who is right. Now, I thought how this was going to work was that since they were fighting some rival aliens who were working cooperatively, that he was going to deem Stitch and Ai the unjust ones because they couldn't work together, and that would be the moment they'd rethink how they've been acting. But nah, let's just have Ai come to that conclusion on her own, practically out of nowhere, and have Stitch and the big guy blow up the ship. Symbolism be damned.
We hope you've enjoyed No Moral Theater.
There are some really good ideas surrounding Ai, but in the end she just comes off as kind of bland. I don't hate Ai, and if anything, I love it if I found her as fun and entertaining as Lilo or Yuna. But I don't. And a lot of the scenes with her honestly just bored the heck out of me. Well, that was 2 pages dedicated to just Ai. Let's take a quick look at the other characters. There's Nani, JJ, David, Dahu. This guy who gives Jumba a bunch of scrolls and pops up at a lot of shrines that Ai and Stitch visit, who I think they should be more suspicious of than they actually are. And the only other human character of note is Ai's Aunt Dayu. Aunt Dayu is basically that sitcom neighbor who is prim and proper and tries to prove that the people across the street are not normal, only to have no one believe her and place her sanity in question. She thinks the mountains are riddled with germs and loves the city and keeps trying to send Ai to live with her. A pursuit that she either gave up after a bunch of random experiments help the small town, or just hasn't been resolved yet. Either way, it's not the best subplot. Well, the humans may be pretty lackluster characters to me, but in a show about Stitch, humans are only half the equation. We've got a whole bunch of new aliens this time. Stitch is... well, he's Stitch. It's really hard to screw up his character. He's still destructive, but just as loyal and caring. But there is quite a bit of fun added when Jumba and Pleakley join the story. No surprise there. Now, so far I've mostly seen mixed reactions to Stitch and Ai as a whole, but something I've noticed a lot of people having a problem with is Jumba's new experiments. Basically, he creates real-life versions of many different Chinese mythological creatures, and a lot of people don't like them. As for me, I'm not against this. Thinking back, Jumba created over 600 of these things, but just stopped after Stitch. You could argue that he no longer had the funding to experiment anymore since Hamsterville was financing their creation, but then how would you explain 627? I kinda like the idea of having Jumba constantly working on something, finding a new avenue for a field of study he clearly has passion for, and a lot of these experiments do look pretty cool. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And while they may be new experiments, I wouldn't call them cousins. None of them join the number rankings, none of them get names of their own, and aside from ones like the Tapir experiment and a couple in that rogue group that Stitch created, Stitch creating an experiment from scratch, that's something I like to see, a lot of them have pretty distinct features and don't really look like traditional experiments. If they were trying to pass these things off as replacements for the dozens of cousins we've come to know and love, we're calling this thing Experiment 634 625 or whatever number we're up to now, then I think I'd have more of a problem with them. But I just consider this another branch of Jumba's work, and just like the original 625, some of them are cool, and some of them are lame. I am surprised that for a creative team that reportedly never saw the anime, despite inheriting a good chunk of its voice cast for the English dub, they gave Jumba another little useless sidekick pet thing. Just like Boogoo. Remember Boogoo? Of course not, because he never did anything. And besides, all the mythical creature experiments get dumped into a convenient parallel dimension when the stories are done with them, so there you go. But let's take a minute to talk about the animation in this show. One of the things that was unsettling to people with the transition from the original series to the anime is the drastic shift in style. While the characters we knew and loved looked exactly the same, everyone else had designs that were typical of a children's anime. While this personally never bothered me, possibly due to how they made combining different art styles work in those various Disney crossovers, I get why people find it unappealing. And thankfully, that is not a problem here. All the returning characters look the same, and the new characters resemble the same designs from the original franchise. If Lilo somehow went on vacation to China, this is probably exactly what it would look like. All the human characters, including Ai, look like they walked in straight from the original films or TV show, but the design consistency I appreciated was with the aliens. While it's not a hard and fast rule, a lot of the alien designs in Lilo and Stitch use traits from Earth animals for a lot of their features. You see this a lot with representatives of the Galactic Federation. There's a reason why people kept comparing Gantu to a whale in the TV show. In Stitch and I, any new alien species carries over this design trend, using elements from insects, lizards, and even platypuses?
Platypi. Platypeople? Whatever.
It's a level of consistency with the franchise's roots that, even though I like the other designs, the anime did not have. Even the backgrounds have that watercolor look to them that was always so distinct in Lilo and Stitch, and they are one of the most appealing things about the look of this show. Plus, the animation in the theme song is a cute homage to Lilo and Stitch's series, which I liked. But on the subject of animation, the animation itself is a bit off. Not that it's bad. Well, sometimes it is, but it mostly jumps around all over the place in terms of fluidity and quality. For the most part, it gets the job done, but as I was watching this, it started to remind me a lot of The Lion Guard, the sort of sequel series to The Lion King on Disney Jr. Both of them captured the original property's style and aesthetic almost perfectly, but with a clearly much more limited budget, the moments of slow or janky movement start to create this weird effect that, as hard as the show tries to convince you, you realize that you're not watching the style in its proper state. There are moments where the animation in Stitch and I is very smooth. Heck, there are moments of flashing back to the previous movies where I swear they just traced over the original frames, resembling those moments almost perfectly. But then there are moments that are slow and feel like they were missing a few frames, and it makes things like fight scenes feel really dragged out and kinda dull. Again, for the most part it gets the job done, and I can think of a couple of exciting scenes, but not nearly enough as the show tries to give you. But there is one more element of Stitch and I that we have to cover, and we possibly saved the largest topic for last. Stitch and I has something of an overarching story. The first thing we see on the show is Stitch being captured and hunted down by what we later find out are two warring alien races, the Romulans and the Klingons. Wait, I mean the Kree and the Skrull. God, no, I mean the Djibouti and the Woolagons. Once Stitch crashes to Earth, he says he has to find a certain shrine while the Djibouti and the Woolagon try to capture and manipulate him. And the Galactic Federation send Jumba and Pleakley to go get him, or they'd be sent to...
That looks like it was designed to look that way, and to be that way.
A very blatant metaphorical hell. Is this really how we're treating Disney's greatest power couple? But that didn't work out, so they just keep an eye on him with, oh my gosh, Cobra! It's Cobra! Cobra's back! Okay. That's a cool cameo. They get points for that. Most of the episodes consist of adventures in the mountains or in the village, usually with aliens. Sometimes it's the warring group, sometimes it's something of Jumba's, stirring a bunch of elements we've already discussed, sometimes with a lesson, sometimes it's just shenanigans, but not much that's that impactful. Outside of a few good moments, there are points where the story either drags, takes unnecessary detours, or grinds to a complete halt that marathoning these got a bit challenging for me. In the penultimate episode of the season, they spend 3 minutes with I and the girls playing a schoolyard game that adds to nothing and goes nowhere. But all that leads me into something that we should probably sort out. Ever since the show was announced, a lot of people have wondered where this fits in the continuity. Heck, a few people were even asking me that in the comments of my last video. And I have no clue. Maybe it was clearer in the original Chinese, but as far as the dub goes, I cannot figure out where we are in the timeline. Since none of the other experiments are seen or even referenced, and they only recreated scenes from the first 2 movies, I thought that maybe this was a sort of side adventure before the TV show began. But there's one problem with that.
Well.
Gantu is Captain again. How? I know he got his position back at the end of Leroy and Stitch, but Reuben is nowhere to be found. They're continuing to treat Stitch like a fugitive, even though if this does take place after the main series, and especially if this takes place after the anime, he's saved the galaxy more than once, and this isn't its own separate thing either, because Lilo is shown to exist and has been a part of Stitch's life. But how long ago that was, or how Stitch wound up in this situation, is anyone's guess. It's mentioned once or twice that Stitch is having some memory problems, which is why it's taken them so long to find the shrine, and why he doesn't seem to be in any hurry to contact Lilo and tell her he's okay, assuming they're still together. Say what you want about the anime, but even the awful explanation we got in the first episode of the dub for why Lilo and Stitch weren't together anymore was something. It let us know where we were and what was happening. There's rumors that more will be explained if the show gets renewed for a second season, and if you want to keep things a little mysterious, if you have a plan for where this is going, fine. I just wish they grounded us a bit more on where we are in the grander story. Just because Stitch doesn't know, doesn't mean we can't. All the other returning characters seem to know. Any of you want to fill us in? Well, at least they brought the ice cream guy back. Now with the Great Wall of China shirt. Okay, that's the past. What's going on in this show? Why is Stitch looking for this shrine? Well, okay, that's a dead end for now, but why is everybody after Stitch? Well, that should be obvious. Stitch is the ultimate destroying machine, capable of leveling cities and stealing any left shoe imaginable. And since we're ignoring that there's possibly hundreds of other experiments with similar destructive powers, which if the anime taught us anything, are really easy to manipulate, that makes Stitch even more of a target. But apparently, there's another reason. The Metamorphosis program. Oh, good Arceus. The Metamorphosis program. So apparently Stitch has this dormant program inside him that, when activated by the desire to destroy large cities, will transform him into...
doing this.
The reasoning for this inclusion was that it was too far-fetched to think that Stitch could destroy a major city single-handedly. Now, I may be wrong, but I thought the fact that Stitch didn't look like he could destroy a city on his own was kind of the point. He's small and fluffy and kind of looks like someone's pet, but he can also think like a supercomputer, pilot almost any vehicle, spit acid, climb walls and ceilings, and lift objects 3,000 times his weight. Stitch is one of the best designed Disney characters out there, partly because it's so deceptive, and because it's so cute. This whole Metamorphosis program thing kind of annoys me a lot. It's a weird thing to introduce. It's weird that it can somehow be prophesized on some paintings from the wall of an ancient shrine at one point. It looks weird with those plasma cannon things on his back and the fact that he doesn't sprout his extra limbs. And it's weird how apparently this program hasn't been activated yet because Stitch became good, which is fine, that makes sense to me, but also because he's never seen a large city. See, that's where this whole not knowing where we are thing becomes a problem again. Even if we ignore the fact that the premise of the last season of the anime has Stitch living in the city, it's in the theme song. But besides that, Stitch has been to a city. He went to Honolulu in the show. They even had a small subplot about it being Stitch's first time in a city.
I know you've always wanted to see a big city.
See big city. 626 program to destroy big city.
Is this a problem? I don't know, because I don't know if that happened yet. Alright, this is getting really long and ranty. Let's wrap this up with the season finale, where Stitch and I create siblings for themselves, and no, I am not considering Scratch a cousin. As far as I'm concerned, if he wasn't made by Jumba, he's not a proper experiment. Even Leroy was made by Jumba, who turned out to be agents of the Djibouti who tricked Stitch into activating his Metamorphosis program. They succeed, underwhelming damage is done, Ai goes after him, and am I the only one who thinks it's weird that this didn't tie into Ai's aunt trying to move her to the city? Think about it. The whole season, Aunt Dayu has been so persistent that I live in the city. And we know what'll happen if Stitch stays in a city. If Stitch tagged along, it would really test the relationship as it would threaten to trigger his programming. And when Stitch did inevitably snap out of it, it would prove that their friendship could overcome whatever gets in their way. Or, just talking to him for a minute works too, I guess. Personally, I think the resolution of the Metamorphosis program is pretty weak, since I don't feel Stitch and I have earned such a deep connection yet. Their friendship is fine and pretty cute, but it seemed to me like they became inseparable a bit too quickly. With the others, there were growing pains and time to adjust. I just don't think it's a bond as strong as we had with Lilo or even Yuna. But that's just me. If you like it, I'm glad. But I will admit, the final fight between Stitch and I and the warring aliens, where they bring back all the magical creature experiments to beat the crap out of these guys, is pretty cool. And even though we are left with a lot of loose ends at the end of this season, there is still the possibility of everything coming together in future seasons. As far as I can tell, nothing's been confirmed yet, so I'll leave it here for now. Overall, Stitch and I is a really mixed bag. I wouldn't say it's bad by any means, but I wouldn't call it very good either. But hey, judging from the comments I've seen so far, people seem to be taking to it much better than the anime, and good for them. Either that, or the people who would think this is an insult to Lilo and Stitch haven't found it yet. But it's not insulting at all. It still holds up the franchise's message of building a family and finding acceptance, even having a stronger sense of community than I think the previous series have had. It's harmless enough, I just wish it was more coherent and creative when telling the story again. I am kind of sorry that this isn't the ultimate defense case that the Stitch anime review was, but I didn't go in waiting to rag on it. I gave this just as fair a shot as everything else in this franchise. There are some interesting ideas and sentimental scenes, but not enough to justify a story that's so far a bit boring and kinda confusing at points. The other shows have had boring low points too, but that was usually just an episode or two, and I would watch either of those shows again before this one. If more episodes are produced, I'll probably check them out, but mostly to see how they address the many questions that are still left in the air. Well, even though it's not a show I really like, it's still time for my... There weren't many episodes that I loved, but if I had to pick a favorite, it'd probably be episode 10, Dream On. It's the one that I felt had the most satisfying setup and payoff. The turns the episode takes would be pretty surprising for the target audience, and the sentimental moments are some of the strongest and most memorable in the series. It's not great, but it's pretty good. And with that, I wish you all a happy 626 day, and hey, maybe next year we'll actually talk about something with Lilo in it. Maybe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.